Hey, good evening. It's April 6th, Thursday, and welcome to Everyday Talk 24/7. We've now come to this Thursday, Jesus' last day of his ministry in terms of working and ministering to the disciples and preparing them. And there's so much that is just jam-packed into this narrative of these last days of Christ and the significance of Easter. And all four Gospels give a lot of time to this last Thursday evening and the significance of it. It's built around, it's not the most important part. The most important part we'll get to in a little bit. But the most important thing we talk about the most is the Lord's Supper. It's the last Passover. And in that last Passover, the elements are changed from what has been commanded in the Old Testament to now the bread and the wine, symbolizing Jesus as the ultimate sacrifice, and that his body and his blood are going to pay the price for our sins. Jesus talks to the disciples while they're in the upper room as he's having the supper with them. He tells them what love is and the significance of it. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples if you have love one for another. He washes their feet. Peter, of course, objects to it. And Jesus, again, explains to him the way things should be. Then Jesus says, one of you will betray me. Again, Peter, no way, I'm not doing this. But of course, we see that he will. And as Jesus has this long discussion with them, we see it played out in John's Gospel about what's going to happen and trying to prepare them. Then the disciples get together. And notice this, look at Luke chapter 22, beginning verse 24. They questioned among themselves which of them who would do this betrayal thing. But then, also, verse 24, a dispute, hang on to your hats here, a dispute arose among them as to which of them was to be considered the greatest. Now again, if we're doing the video documentary here, and we stop it right here, we go, after all of this, after 3 years with Jesus, all of his teaching, the Last Supper, the washing of the feet, the description of what love is, that Jesus is going to be betrayed. Their response is, we're going to have a dispute about who's going to be considered the greatest? If you stop the videotape right there, the video documentary, and say, these guys are toast. Christianity doesn't have a hope. But Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. See, with all this week, we've been looking at Jesus as saying, don't be like the religious establishment. Got some trucks tonight, sorry about that. Don't be like the religious establishment. Be different. And they still don't get it after all these illustrations. So he finally lets them know, don't be like that. Don't be someone who wants to be served. Be a true servant the way I've been to you. Then we have he says some more things to them. And then Jesus goes out to pray on the Mount of Olives. Again, I'm not covering everything here. But notice, this is what I want us to talk about tonight and focus on. Because this is the most significant thing out of all these events, out of this entire week. Apart from the crucifixion and the resurrection, This is the most significant thing. Listen to what happens here. Jesus is on the Mount of Olives. He went out to pray, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them and knelt down and prayed. Listen to this prayer that Jesus prayed. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." Do you understand what he's saying here? Jesus, whose entire human existence was for this moment, so that he could bring honor to God by dying for his people. From a human perspective, he knows the weight of it. And yet he comes to the Father and says, "Father," verse 42, "if you are willing, take this cup from me." All of human history right now is hanging in the balance. Again, if we're doing a documentary on it, if we're following along the story, and Jesus says these words, everything is at stake. If God answers this request, human history is lost. Humans are lost. We're all gone. But notice he follows this up immediately. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Remember what's coming. 2 Corinthians tells us in chapter 5, verses 17 to 21. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. Take away this cup where I become evil and guilty, where you walk away from me, where you pour out your wrath on me. And for all the ugly, filthy sins of Jay Yance, I'm going to pour my mouth out on you. And not just Jay, but the entirety of the people that Jesus died to save. And God, in great compassion, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, do you understand? Being in anguish. I'm glad that the clouds are kind of over me tonight. Being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. This is the key moment of this final week. Indeed, it's the key moment of the entirety of human history. Because if Jesus does not give himself to the will of his Father, follows his will, because he hasn't done anything wrong, he's about to know what it means not to be with his Father. He had been that way in eternity. He had been that way his entire time on earth. And now he's going to be apart from God. And instead of the compassion, the companionship, the close unity of the Trinity, the wrath of God is going to be poured out upon him, and he knows it. And when he rises to go back to the disciples, when he rises to go back from the disciples, he's walking into the very pit of hell, walking in to face all the punishment that you and I deserve. So when he arose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. They're the ones that, Jesus is the one that you sorrow. Why are you sleeping, he asks. Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. And while he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. And he approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Those are the events. This key moment. This is how this day ends, this Thursday. This is a gripping story. And the Lord's Supper and the washing of the feet and all the other events that are happening. If Jesus does not honor his Father and bow to his Father's will rather than his own, then the crucifixion never happens. The resurrection never happens. And we have no hope. But Jesus gave himself fully. Catch the momentous statement. Take this cup from me, if you are willing. But then, not my will, but yours. And you and I have life because of that. That's the thought from this Thursday. And tomorrow, we'll talk about the crucifixion of Christ. And thanks so much for being here, and may we all grasp the wonder of what Jesus has done for us and the depth of his sacrifice. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Good evening. Thank you so much for watching. It is such a huge encouragement.